Saturday mornings used to be our thing. We had this rhythm. I'd wake up first, make coffee, and bring it to her while she lay under the covers scrolling mindlessly through her phone. Sometimes we'd chat. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence, content with the comfort of familiarity. 10 years together made moments like that feel automatic, almost sacred. That morning wasn't much different. Or at least it didn't start out different. I padded down to the kitchen, barefoot, yawning. The sun had barely risen, casting that pale gray light across the countertops. I started the coffee maker, letting the familiar sound of it brewing fill the quiet. The smell of it always reminded me of calm, normalcy, safety. I added hazelnut creamer to hers, 2 tablespoons like always, and headed upstairs with both mugs. I didn't think much of it. Honestly, I wasn't thinking at all. Not until I opened the bedroom door and saw her lying there, half sitting against the pillows, scrolling through her phone with the faintest smile on her face. I smiled too. That used to be my favorite sight. Her messy hair, no makeup, eyes still sleepy but bright. If you'd asked me in that moment if I trusted her, if I thought I knew her, I would have said yes without blinking. I handed her the coffee and leaned against the headboard, sipping mine. I didn't say anything, just watched her scroll. That's when it happened. A notification popped up on her screen, and it wasn't from her work group chat like she claimed. It was from someone named M. No last name, just the letter. The preview was barely visible, but the image told me everything I needed to know. I caught it in that brief flash before she instinctively tilted her screen away. It was her, in someone else's arms. Not in an office, not under fluorescent lights. It was dim, warm, mood lighting, the kind of place that invites closeness. A lounge or bar, maybe. She was wearing a black dress, not one I recognized. Her smile was soft, different. It wasn't the smile she gave at family gatherings or in posed holiday photos. It was a private smile, one that belonged to a moment, one that didn't include me. My heart paused, literally paused. There was a half-second of disorientation, like the floor beneath me had shifted. "Who's that?" I asked, not accusing, not angry, just asking. Like I was trying to identify a plant I'd seen before and couldn't place. She barely flinched. That's what got me first. How fast she switched. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, God," she said, as she flicked the message away and locked her screen. "That? It's from forever ago. Some dumb team-building thing from like 2 years ago. Someone just found it and started sending it around again. I told you about that night, remember? The bar after the conference?" Her voice was smooth. She sipped her coffee almost too casually. No stammer, no panic. Just business as usual. But here's the thing. I do remember that night. Or at least what she told me about it. She said it was boring. Said she left early. Said she went straight back to her hotel room because everyone else wanted to keep drinking and she wasn't in the mood. I never saw that black dress before either. And I know every item in her closet. I've sat on the bed while she changed for date nights. I've waited outside fitting rooms while she debated between outfits. I would have remembered that dress, that neckline, that look. Still, I didn't press. I nodded slowly, like her answer made sense. Like I believed her. But inside, I felt that photo lodge somewhere in my chest, heavy and unmovable. It wasn't the picture itself that hurt. It was her eyes in it, the softness, the familiarity, the comfort, the way her body leaned into his without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like that moment had meant something. And the worst part? The look she gave me the instant she noticed I'd seen it. There was a flash in her expression. Just a flicker, barely perceptible. Fear? Guilt? Maybe both. It vanished quickly, buried under that professional calm she wore so well. But it was there. It was there. That look was real. It didn't match the words that followed. After she offered her explanation, she turned back to scrolling like nothing had happened. She even made a joke about how awful the lighting was in the picture. I nodded again, forcing a smile. I didn't ask any more questions. But my coffee suddenly tasted bitter. I got up a few minutes later, told her I was going to clean out the garage. It was a lie. I didn't do anything productive. I just stood there for a while, leaning against the wall, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the adjacent room, letting the image of her and that stranger play on a loop in my head. The thing is, you never expect the unraveling to start on an ordinary day. You think it'll be something big, an affair exposed in a dramatic confrontation, a fight that escalates too far. But sometimes it starts with a photo, a glimpse, a question dodged with too much ease. That moment sat with me the rest of the day, and the next, and the one after that. She didn't bring it up again. Neither did I. And that silence between us, that unspoken thing, it started to spread, like a crack across glass. You don't notice it growing at first, but you feel it when you touch it. I started watching more closely after that. Her phone was always face down now, even when she wasn't texting. She used to leave it on the table during dinner. Now it followed her everywhere. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the image of her in that dress, with that smile, wrapped in someone else's arms. That wasn't a group photo. That wasn't work. That was a moment she didn't expect me to see. And once you see it, you can't go back. You can't unsee betrayal. You just learn how to live in its shadow. After that morning with the photo, something changed in me. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a gear slipping out of sync in a machine you've trusted your whole life. At first, you don't hear it. You just feel it. An odd vibration beneath the surface. A strange noise that doesn't belong. That's what it felt like between us. Offbeat. I started seeing things I had ignored before. Not new behaviors exactly, just ones I'd dismissed or rationalized. That's the thing about hindsight. It doesn't just reveal the truth. It shows you how much you chose not to see. Her phone was always face down now. Always. She used to leave it lying around, kitchen counters, nightstands, even the couch cushions. It buzzed, she answered. No secrets. No hesitation. Now, it never left her side. If she left a room, it came with her. If she showered, it went on the sink behind a locked door. She'd glance at it constantly, typing quick replies with the speed of someone trying not to be noticed. When I asked who she was texting, she always gave the same response, just work stuff, followed by a quick kiss or a laugh, like my curiosity was adorable, like I was being paranoid for caring. But I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. Finally, the evenings changed too. Our routines used to be simple. Dinner together, maybe a movie, sometimes just music and conversation. I used to love the way we talked, the back and forth, the inside jokes, the comfort of knowing someone so deeply you didn't need to finish your sentence for them to understand it. That was gone. Now she was tired. Always tired. Long day. Stressful meeting. I just need some quiet tonight. That's what she'd say, curling up on her side of the couch, scrolling endlessly while I sat in silence, staring at the TV and pretending we were still us. Even her scent had changed. That sounds crazy, I know, but I noticed. I used to know her perfume, warm, floral, something that felt like home. Lately, it was sharper, more dramatic. A different brand, a different feel. I asked her once, lightly, "New perfume?" She shrugged. Sample from a coworker. But she kept wearing it. Every day. Especially on the nights she came home late. And then there were the receipts. I found the first one in the glove compartment of her car, buried under tissues and gum wrappers. It was from a rooftop restaurant we'd never been to, the kind you need reservations for weeks in advance. Expensive. Candlelight and skyline kind of place. Definitely not a business lunch. Definitely not a quick bite after a long meeting. The bill was for 2 entrees, wine, dessert. Scrawled on the back was a phone number. Not hers. I memorized it but never called. I still don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to hear a man's voice on the other end. Maybe I wasn't ready to know for sure. I wasn't there yet. Not then. I confronted her. Not directly, not aggressively. Just asked what restaurant it was. She barely looked up from her laptop. Oh, that? Team dinner. We closed a client. Boss paid. Her answer was smooth. Rehearsed. Then she changed the subject. Asked what I wanted for dinner. Like nothing happened. Like the question had been a leaf blown in through the window. Swept up. Forgotten. and I let it happen. That's what eats at me now. Not that she lied, but that I let her lie so easily. I started remembering other things, too. Little moments I'd filed away as nothing. The way she used to ask me to pick her up from work, and then suddenly stopped. The way she'd change clothes after coming home late, even if she claimed she was going straight to bed. The way she laughed louder at texts than she ever did at my jokes. I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just insecure. But there's a moment when the pattern becomes too obvious, too complete. And when that moment comes, it feels like drowning because you're suddenly surrounded by proof and yet completely alone. I remember this one night, midweek, cold outside. She texted me saying she'd be home late, had a client call that ran over. I didn't question it. I was making dinner, lighting candles, trying to bring some kind of warmth back into the house. I even saved her a plate, put on music I knew she liked. Hope is a funny thing. Even when it hurts, you still hold on to it. She came in around 10, flustered, hair slightly tousled, eyes bright in a way that didn't match her story. "Sorry," she said, kicking off her heels. Traffic was insane. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her plate, and went upstairs to shower before eating. Later, I noticed a lipstick stain on her wine glass. The problem was, she hadn't been wearing lipstick when she came home. That's the kind of thing you don't unsee. It sticks in your head like a math problem that doesn't add up. And after enough of those, you start connecting dots. Not because you want to, but because they're already there. I started keeping track, even if only mentally. Not because I was trying to catch her. I think part of me still wanted to be wrong. But because I needed to know. I needed to stop feeling crazy. She had built this wall of plausible deniability, and I was tired of pretending it wasn't made of lies. One night, I stayed up late, long after she'd gone to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and opened a blank notebook, just started writing everything I remembered. Dates, places, odd phrases she'd said, names that came up too often, things that didn't line up. The notebook wasn't about evidence. It was about clarity. Every page felt like a crack forming in the foundation of our life. Not sudden, just steady. I remember writing one sentence in the margin. Would she lie if I asked again? I never got the courage to find out. Not directly. I still wanted to believe in her, even as everything pointed the other way. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It doesn't steal your trust all at once. It asks for it, piece by piece, until there's nothing left. Then one night, while she was in the shower, her iPad pinged on the kitchen table. We shared the account. Technically, I hadn't planned to check it, but when I glanced at the screen, I saw a preview of a message, her name and his. It wasn't romantic. Not obviously. Just a short line. Same place tomorrow? No punctuation. No context. Just that. But I knew. You can feel it when you're being replaced, even before you're told. Even before it's said out loud. The signs aren't loud. They're quiet. Dismissed. Denied. But they build. And once you see the whole picture, it becomes impossible to pretend you don't recognize the shape of absence. I locked the iPad, sat back down, sipped cold coffee I had poured hours ago. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel uncertain. I felt still, because I wasn't imagining it. The story had already started without me. I was just catching up. The thing about truth is, once it starts revealing itself, it doesn't stop. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just keeps showing up in plain sight, daring you to keep pretending. I came home early that day. Total accident. A client had canceled our meeting last minute. Something about a scheduling mix-up. I remember standing in the parking lot for a second, holding my keys, thinking maybe I'd surprise her. Maybe I'd pick up dinner on the way home. Maybe we'd reconnect somehow. I still wanted that, even after everything. That should have been my first clue. The fact that I was thinking in terms of reconnection. Not comfort. Not ease. Not laughter. Just a hope that maybe we could find something again. Something that had clearly drifted. I didn't text her. I figured I'd just walk in, make something warm, wait for her to get off work. Nothing dramatic. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to feel like I was part of my own home again. The neighborhood was quiet when I pulled in. Mid-afternoon, sun hanging low, trees swaying gently in the wind. Everything looked still, like nothing was wrong. That's the worst part about betrayal, how ordinary everything looks from the outside. Like the world doesn't care that yours is coming apart. I opened the door quietly. Habit, I guess. I wasn't trying to sneak around, but something in me told me to move slow. The living room was empty. The air smelled faintly of vanilla, one of those candles she liked to burn during her downtime. Her heels were by the door, which meant she was home. That surprised me. She hadn't mentioned anything about taking the day off. I walked toward the kitchen, not making a sound. I don't know why I was so cautious. Maybe some instinct kicking in. Something subconscious that already knew. And then I heard it, laughter. Hers. It floated through the hallway, light and playful, layered with something I hadn't heard from her in months. Not the obligatory chuckle she gave me during dinner, or the tight smile she wore when we passed each other in the hallway. This was real. Light. Free. I froze. Then came a man's voice. Low, amused, followed by the sound of a glass being set down on the countertop. My pulse was deafening. I didn't go in. I didn't burst through the door or shout her name. I didn't need to. The kitchen window gave me everything. From the side of the hallway, there's this narrow view, not of the kitchen itself, but its reflection in the hallway mirror. A little off-center, but clear enough. I could see just enough of the kitchen through that reflection to watch the scene unfold like a twisted painting. She was there, standing by the island, wine glass in hand, wearing a red dress. The red dress. I hadn't seen that one in years. She used to wear it when we'd go out for anniversary dinners or weekend getaways. Once, she told me it made her feel too flashy, said it didn't fit anymore, too bold, not work appropriate. But there she was in that same dress, laughing like she was on vacation. And not alone. The man was standing close to her, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. Tall, neatly dressed, holding his wine like he belonged there. His body was angled toward her, that casual kind of lean people do when they're comfortable. Like they've done it a dozen times before. She was smiling. Genuinely. The kind of smile that made her eyes crease. The kind that used to be mine. I couldn't hear every word. Just pieces. You always do that, she said, laughing. And then something like, don't tempt me, felt like a slap I never saw coming. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, staring into that reflection like it was a window into a version of my life I hadn't been invited to. Everything clicked at once. The late nights, the changed perfume, the dinners she forgot to tell me about. It wasn't vague anymore. It wasn't suspicion. It was right there, framed in a mirror I walked past every day. She never saw me, neither did he. They just kept laughing, sipping wine like this was some kind of private ritual. Like I didn't exist. I backed away slowly, each step quiet, calculated. My hand was clenched so tight around my keys that when I got outside, I realized my palm had little half-moon indentations from the metal. I remember standing next to the car, chest tight, trying not to throw up. My legs felt like rubber. I'd spent weeks piecing together fragments, and now the whole picture was clear, and it made me sick. I didn't go back inside. I didn't knock. I didn't even send a text. I got in the car and drove. Nowhere in particular. Just away. Far enough that I couldn't hear the echo of their laughter in my head. I ended up parked in an empty grocery store lot. I sat there for I don't know how long. Maybe an hour, maybe more, engine off, head against the steering wheel. Couldn't even cry. It was like my body had shut down. Numb with disbelief. I felt like a guest in my own life. Like I'd walked into someone else's story by mistake. My phone buzzed twice while I sat there. I didn't check it. Eventually, I drove back. But not to the house. I couldn't face her. Not yet. I went to my brother's place instead. He wasn't home, but he'd given me a spare key months ago when he was traveling. I let myself in and sat on his couch, staring at nothing. I didn't even take off my shoes. That night, she texted me. Just once. Hey, where are you? Thought you'd be home by now. No emoji. No question mark. Just flat words. As if nothing had happened. I didn't reply. She didn't call. She didn't follow up. And that told me everything. She wasn't worried. She wasn't concerned. She just wanted to manage the narrative. She didn't expect me to see. That was the difference. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken lapse. This was routine. This was planned. I stayed at my brother's that night. Sat awake most of it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her reflection. That red dress, that wine glass, that laugh. It looped over and over, like my mind was trying to burn it in so I wouldn't forget. As if I could. The next morning, I drove back early. She was already gone. Left a note on the counter saying she had an early meeting and would text later. I didn't care. I walked upstairs and packed a bag. Enough clothes for a week. Maybe 2. I didn't slam doors or throw things. I didn't rage. I just moved. Mechanical. Detached. I wasn't running. I was leaving. Before I walked out, I paused in the hallway and looked at that same mirror. The one that had shown me the truth. It looked different now. Not because it changed, but because I had. And once you see clearly, there's no going back. It had been a week since the kitchen. A week since I stood in that hallway, staring through a reflection that shattered everything I thought I knew. I hadn't confronted her. I didn't throw accusations or demand confessions. I just left. I stayed at my brother's place for a few nights, then bounced between cheap hotels and long drives with no destination. She texted. She called once. Left a voicemail that sounded more annoyed than concerned. I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk. I didn't respond, because what was there to talk about? I'd already seen everything I needed to see. And worse, I saw what I meant to her in that moment. Nothing. Still, I went with her to the party. Sounds insane, I know. After all that, why show up at a colleague's get-together like nothing had happened? Truth is, I needed to see it play out. I needed to stop imagining versions of her I wanted to believe in. I needed to see who she really was when she thought I was still in the dark. The invitation had come weeks earlier. One of her coworkers was throwing a farewell party. She'd insisted we both go. "It'll be good for us," she said. Back when I was still pretending we were okay. I hadn't planned on attending. But when she brought it up again, texting me midweek with a breezy, "Still going to the party, right? Should I pick you up?" Like I hadn't gone silent, like I hadn't packed a bag and vanished. I said yes. I told myself I wanted closure. What I really wanted was clarity. She picked me up in her car. Didn't ask where I'd been. Didn't comment on the packed duffel in the back seat. She wore a silver dress. Sleeveless, low-cut, confident. She looked good. Too good for someone claiming to repair a marriage. But maybe that was the point. On the way there, she filled the silence with small talk. Spotify playlists, traffic, someone from her office getting promoted. I barely responded. She didn't seem to mind. When we arrived, the house was already buzzing. String lights blinked across the backyard. Glasses clinked. People laughed in bursts. She walked ahead of me, heels clicking across the driveway like a metronome. Steady, unbothered. I followed, hands in my pockets, trying to ignore the knot in my chest. Inside, the music was loud enough to make conversation feel like a performance. She moved through the crowd like she belonged, smiling, waving, touching arms in that subtle, practiced way of hers. I watched from a corner near the kitchen, pretending to sip whatever was in my red plastic cup. Took less than 10 minutes before I saw it. The shift. The way she lit up around a particular group of guys. Too much laughing, too much leaning in. One of them whispered something in her ear. She touched his shoulder as she laughed, tilting her head back like he just said the funniest thing in the world. I wasn't jealous. I was done with jealousy. But I was watching a stranger. And she didn't seem to care that I was there. She didn't introduce me to anyone. Didn't acknowledge me. I was just a body in the room. At one point, someone asked who I was. I heard it, clearly, as I passed by the dining room to grab another drink. "That's her husband, I think," someone said. "They're kind of complicated." Complicated. I guess that's one way to say unraveling. I found a quieter spot near the back porch, away from the noise. The lights outside cast a soft amber over the lawn. I stood there staring into the night, trying to breathe past the tension coiling in my shoulders. She found me about 20 minutes later. "There you are," she said, walking up with a fresh drink. "You've been hiding." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked. The gloss on her lips, the light flush in her cheeks, the calculated softness in her voice, like we were still playing house for company. "I'm not hiding," I said. "Then come back inside," she said lightly. "You look uncomfortable out here." I wanted to say, "I look uncomfortable everywhere these days," but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Do you even remember the last time we talked about something real?" She blinked. Her smile wavered. "Not much, just enough for a crack to show." "What's going on with you?" she asked, her tone sharpening. "You've been weird for weeks. Ever since I saw you," I interrupted. That stopped her. She stared at me, trying to gauge how much I knew. I watched her eyes flicker with calculation. But before she could answer, someone called her name from the kitchen. A male voice, too familiar. She turned toward it like muscle memory. And then, she did the thing that finally broke me. She rolled her eyes at me, in front of people, like I was the burden, like I was embarrassing her. "I'll be back," she said quickly, and disappeared into the crowd before I could say anything else. That was the moment, right there. Not the texts, not the kitchen, not even the reflection in the mirror. It was that moment, her choosing to walk away from a hard conversation and back into the arms of a party that had already accepted her lies. That was the true betrayal. Because now it wasn't about cheating. It was about indifference. And that I couldn't survive. I didn't leave immediately. I waited. I watched. She danced. She flirted. She made rounds like the queen of a kingdom I no longer lived in. At some point, she passed by me without looking. Didn't even pause. When I finally stepped outside, the air hit me like ice. I pulled out my phone and booked a motel on the edge of town. Cheap, close, anonymous. I didn't even tell her I was leaving. I just left. The parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. I stood there for a while before checking in, staring at the motel sign flickering overhead. My fingers were still numb from the cold. That night, I sat on a hard mattress in a room that smelled like old carpet and cleaner, staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch walls. I just felt done. She didn't call. Didn't ask where I went. Didn't check if I was okay. She had opened the door with her silence, with her dismissal, with her public performance of detachment. And I quietly, fully stepped through it. When people say betrayal breaks you, they're wrong. It doesn't break you. It empties you. It hollows you out, scoops away all the soft parts, and leaves just enough shell for you to start over. And that night, in a motel lit by a neon sign that buzzed all night long, I realized I was already starting. Not out of anger, not revenge, just necessity. Because love can't survive where it isn't seen. And I wasn't seen anymore. I woke up the next morning in that motel room with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from rest, but from exhaustion. The type of quiet that settles when your body has given up on fighting, when your mind is too worn down to protest anymore. The room was dim, the blinds letting in only thin stripes of light across the stained carpet. My clothes were in a pile on the chair, my phone silent on the nightstand. No messages, no missed calls. I laid there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd even noticed I was gone, wondering if she thought about me at all once I slipped out of the party. Probably not. Not when there were people laughing at her jokes and pouring her drinks, validating her charm while I stood off to the side like a forgotten placeholder. It was a strange kind of pain. Not sharp, not dramatic, just hollow, heavy. I got dressed slowly, didn't even bother to shave. I left the key at the front desk without looking the receptionist in the eye. Outside, the sky was gray, humid, the kind of weather that makes everything feel heavier than it should. I hadn't planned to go anywhere. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. Go back to the house? Sit in the driveway while she pretended nothing happened? Go to work and pretend I wasn't unraveling inside? Instead, I just drove. No destination, just forward. Somewhere around mid-morning, I pulled into a quiet cafe I barely noticed until I was already in the parking lot. One of those places tucked between a laundromat and a gas station. The kind that smells like fresh bread and plays jazz over the speakers even when no one's listening. I stepped inside and ordered a black coffee, the way I always do when I don't know what else to feel. The barista smiled politely, but I could see her glance at the bags under my eyes, the worn look of someone who hasn't had a decent night's sleep in a while. I found a table near the window, tucked into the corner. And that's when I saw her, Leanna. We lived in the same apartment complex before I moved in with my wife, or I guess I should say before I moved in with the person I thought was my wife. I recognized her immediately. Leanna always had this calm about her. Quiet, observant, like she didn't need to fill silence to be comfortable in it. She was sitting 2 tables over, curled up with a paperback and a half-empty tea mug. A light green sweater draped across her shoulders, hair up in a loose knot. She looked up from her book at the same time I glanced over. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Not surprise, just curiosity. Then something softer. Concern, maybe. She gave me a small smile. And for some reason, that simple gesture, a smile from someone who didn't expect anything from me, felt like a lifeline. I nodded back. She tilted her head and motioned toward the empty chair across from her. "You look like you could use a break from your own thoughts," she said gently. I hesitated, then stood up and carried my coffee over. "Is it that obvious?" She smiled again. "Only a little." I sat down, and just like that, with no effort, no planning, no agenda, we started talking. Not about pain, not about betrayal, just life. She asked me what I was reading lately. I told her the truth, that I hadn't picked up a book in months. She told me about the one she was reading, some novel about a lighthouse keeper and lost letters. I listened, really listened, because in that moment, it felt like the first honest conversation I'd had in a long, long time. We talked about music, old movies, how weirdly satisfying it is to organize a messy closet. Nothing important, and yet all of it was, because for the first time in months I didn't feel like I was being weighed, measured, or compared to someone else. I didn't feel like I had to prove I was enough. With Leanna, I just was. There were no interrogations, no passive-aggressive jabs, no invisible scoreboard tracking who said what last. There was just warmth, presence, the kind of peace you don't realize you've been missing until you feel it again. At some point, she looked down at my cup and said, "You know, you might like honey in your coffee. Sounds weird, but it works." I laughed. It was quiet, caught me off guard. "I could use something new," I said. "Everything else is kind of falling apart." She didn't ask. She didn't push. She just nodded like she understood without needing the details. "I figured," she said gently. "You've got that look." "What look?" She tilted her head. "Like your soul's been living in a storage unit for a while." That made me laugh again. Louder this time. And just like that, I felt a little more human. Not whole. Not fixed. But less broken. We sat there for over an hour. No clocks. No expectations. Just the soft buzz of the cafe and the occasional chime of the door as people came and went. Eventually, she gathered her things and stood up. "I should go," she said. "Laundry calls." "Right?" I said, standing too. "It was good, though, seeing you." She nodded. "You too, stranger." She started to walk away, then paused. "If you ever need somewhere quiet, this place is usually empty in the mornings. Plus, I've claimed the corner by the window." "Duly noted." She smiled once more and left, her sweater slipping off one shoulder as she disappeared into the gray morning. I stood there for a long moment before walking back to my table. I sat down and stared into my now cold coffee, but it didn't matter. Something had shifted. She hadn't asked what was wrong, and somehow that made all the difference. That quiet hour stayed with me longer than any argument ever had. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was just honest. A pause in a life that had been spiraling for too long. A small reminder that connection still existed, that I wasn't invisible. I didn't drive back to the house after that. I called into work, told them I was taking a personal day. Then I parked my car near the river and sat on a bench for a while, letting the silence stretch without guilt. I didn't check my phone. I didn't answer her messages. I just existed. And it was enough. That night, I didn't go back to the motel either. I stayed with an old friend. Someone who didn't ask questions when I showed up with tired eyes and a backpack. He handed me a beer and turned on the game. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The next few days passed like that. Slow, quiet, strange. She kept texting. Not constantly, but enough. Where are you? Can we talk? Please just call me. But I didn't. Because every time I thought about that party, about the way she looked through me like I was already gone, I remembered Leanna's soft voice over tea and paperbacks, and I chose that memory instead. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start, a place to begin again, not with her, with myself.